Ladies and gentlemen, life is a battlefield. And in this battle, you must recognize that not everyone deserves access to your time, your energy, or your mind. You have obligations, yes, but not to those who drain you, not to those who pull you down into the abyss of their own chaos. We live in a world where people demand your presence without earning it. They take, they manipulate, they linger like shadows, offering nothing but distraction and disorder. And sometimes the most powerful move, the most necessary move, is to ghost them, to vanish, to withdraw your attention and to reclaim yourself. Because if you don't set boundaries, the world will set them for you. And trust me, you won't like where that leads. Your time is the most valuable resource you have, and yet it is the easiest thing to squander. Every moment you give away is a moment you never get back. People will ask for it, demand it, waste it, and take it for granted, but very few will respect it. The problem is that many people don't realize just how finite their time is until they've already spent too much of it on the wrong things, the wrong people, and the wrong distractions. Time is non-refundable, and yet we often treat it as though we have an unlimited supply. We allow ourselves to be pulled into meaningless conversations, pointless arguments, and obligations that do nothing but drain us. And why? Because we feel guilty. Because we feel guilty. Because we feel responsible for how others perceive us. Because we're afraid of what will happen if we just say no. But here's the truth. The way you spend your time is a direct reflection of what you value. If you give it away too freely, people will assume it has no worth. If you don't set boundaries around it, others will decide for you where it goes. And most of the time, their decisions won't serve your best interests. They will serve theirs. People will ask for just a minute of your time and then take an hour. They will want your attention, your energy, your validation, and they will rarely consider what it costs you to give it. Love. This is why ghosting people is sometimes not only acceptable, but necessary. If you continue to entertain people who take you for granted, you are teaching them that your time is not valuable. If you answer every message, return every call, and engage in every demand for your attention, you are training others to expect your availability at their convenience. The reality is that not every conversation needs a response. Not every person deserves your presence. And not every relationship is worth maintaining. People will guilt you into believing that you owe them an explanation, that disappearing is rude, that cutting ties is cruel. But what's cruel is allowing yourself to be drained by people who don't value you. There is a difference between being kind and being available to everyone at all times. People-pleasing is not kindness. It's self-sacrifice. And often the people who expect the most from you are the ones who contribute the least. If you continue to make yourself accessible to people who add no real value to your life, you will eventually find yourself depleted. Ghosting is not about being heartless. It's about self-respect. It's about understanding that you do not owe everyone a seat at your table. Some people don't belong in your life, not because they are bad people, but because they are not the right people for you. There are individuals who will only reach out when they need something. People who drain you with their constant negativity, their neediness, their inability to respect your boundaries. People who leave you feeling exhausted rather than uplifted. When you recognize these patterns, it becomes clear that the healthiest thing you can do is remove yourself from the equation. Opponent. You don't owe them a debate, an explanation, or a justification. You owe yourself peace. Time is the foundation of everything. It determines what you build, who you become, and what you accomplish. Wasting it on the wrong people is one of the greatest tragedies of life. You must protect it with the same intensity that you would protect your most valuable possessions, because in the end, it is the only thing you truly own. Silence is one of the most powerful responses you can give, yet many people feel compelled to always explain themselves, to justify their actions, and to make sure everyone understands their side of the story. But the truth is, not everyone is entitled to an explanation. Not every situation requires closure. And in many cases, silence speaks louder than words ever could. People have been conditioned to believe that they must respond to everything, every message, every call, every demand for attention. They feel obligated to give people answers, to engage in discussions they don't want to have, and to defend choices that should never need defending. But when you engage with people who drain you, who manipulate you, who take your time for granted, you are giving them something they haven't earned, the right to occupy space in your life. Not every question deserves an answer. Not every conflict needs your participation. Some people thrive on drama, on pulling you into endless debates, on keeping you engaged just so they can have control over your emotions. When you stay silent, you take that control back. You send a message that is far more powerful than any words you could say, that you will not be manipulated, that you will not be guilt-tripped, and that you do not owe them your energy. There is a misconception that ignoring someone is cruel, that ghosting people is a sign of immaturity, that every situation should be handled with a long, drawn-out conversation. But that is not reality. The reality is that some people don't deserve the courtesy of your words. Some people will never accept the truth, no matter how carefully you phrase it. Some people are looking for a reaction, not a resolution. And in those cases, silence is not only the best response, it is the only response that truly sets you free. When you choose silence, you are not being passive. You are making a deliberate decision to disengage from situations that do not serve you. You are reclaiming your power by refusing to entertain negativity. You are teaching people that access to you is not a given, it is earned. And if someone repeatedly disrespects you, drains you, or refuses to acknowledge your boundaries, then the most effective way to communicate your position is to say nothing at all. People who demand your attention often do so because they know they have no real control over you, me. Their power lies in their ability to provoke you, to make you explain yourself, to keep you engaged in a cycle of endless conversations that go nowhere. But when you choose not to respond, they lose that power. They are left with nothing but their own words, their own assumptions, and their own unresolved emotions. Silence also forces people to reflect in a way that words never can. When you argue with someone, they focus on your words, on how to counter them, on how to justify their own position. But when you stay silent, they are left to confront their own actions. They have no choice but to sit with their own behavior and question why you have removed yourself from the situation. There is strength in restraint. There is power in walking away. There is wisdom in understanding that not every battle is worth fighting. Silence is not avoidance. It is clarity. It is knowing that some situations do not deserve your participation. It is recognizing that your energy is precious and that wasting it on people who will never understand your perspective is a battle that does nothing but drain you. People will tell you that silence is a form of disrespect, that you should always provide closure, that you should explain yourself even when you don't want to. But often the only people who demand an explanation are the ones who know they are in the wrong. They are the ones who benefit from keeping you engaged, from making you feel guilty, from keeping you trapped in a cycle of endless conversations that serve no purpose. When you refuse to participate, you are not being unkind. You are simply choosing yourself over the expectations of others. There are people in this world who will drain the life out of you without a second thought. They will latch onto your energy, your time, your emotional resources, and take as much as they possibly can without ever giving anything back. These people are often subtle in their approach. They don't always show up with obvious bad intentions. Instead, they disguise their presence under the guise of friendship, family, or even love. But their actions reveal the truth. Every interaction leaves you feeling exhausted, depleted, and somehow less than you were before. Energy vampires exist in many forms. Some are chronic complainers, always unloading their negativity onto you, making their problems your problems, expecting you to be their emotional dumping ground. They don't look for solutions. They don't take responsibility. They simply offload their burdens onto others and expect sympathy, comfort, and reassurance without ever making a change. And if you allow it, they will keep coming back for more. Others drain you with their constant need for validation. They require your attention, your praise, your emotional support at all times. They call, they text. They expect you to be available whenever they need reassurance. They make their problems urgent and make you feel guilty if you don't drop everything to tend to them. They pull you into their world and demand that you center them in your life, often at the expense of your own well-being. Then there are those who thrive on drama. They are always caught up in some kind of conflict, some kind of issue, some personal crisis that they need you to help them navigate. They stir up problems, involve you in their chaos, and leave you emotionally drained while they move on to the next situation. They bring stress and disorder into your life, and the longer you engage with them, the more they pull you into their never-ending cycle of dysfunction. Perhaps the most dangerous type of energy vampire is the one who operates under the illusion of care. These people seem supportive. They appear to be on your side, but their presence slowly wears you down. They undermine your confidence with backhanded compliments. They make subtle comments that make you question yourself. They discourage you from making changes that would benefit you. They make you feel guilty for prioritizing yourself. They disguise their manipulation as concern, making it difficult for you to recognize the damage they are doing. The key to dealing with energy vampires is understanding that their presence in your life is not an accident. They are there because you have allowed them to be. And that is not a judgment. It is simply a reality. People will take as much as you give them. They will push boundaries until they are stopped. And if you don't recognize the patterns, you will find yourself constantly exhausted, constantly giving, constantly depleted, with nothing left for yourself. It is not your job to fix people. It is not your responsibility to carry the weight of someone else's emotional burdens at the expense of your own well-being. If someone is always draining you, making you feel exhausted, making you feel like you are running on empty, then it is time to take a step back and reassess whether their presence in your life is truly serving you. The hardest part about removing energy vampires from your life is the guilt that comes with it. These people often rely on guilt to keep you engaged. They will make you feel like a bad person for stepping away. They will accuse you of being selfish, of not caring, of abandoning them. But the truth is, people who truly respect you, who truly value you, will not drain you. They will not make you feel like you are responsible for their emotional state. They will not demand more from you than you are able to give. The moment you start setting boundaries, you will notice how quickly some people disappear. The people who only wanted to take from you will resent the fact that you are no longer an endless supply of emotional energy. And that is a good thing. Because the people who remain, the ones who respect your time, your boundaries, your well-being, those are the ones worth keeping. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define who you are, what you accept, and how others treat you. They are not walls that shut people out, but rather guidelines that determine the quality of your relationships, your self-respect, and your mental well-being. Without them, you become a person who is constantly at the mercy of others, drained, overextended, and struggling to maintain any sense of control over your own life. The way people treat you is a direct reflection of the boundaries you either set or fail to enforce. The truth is, people will take as much as you allow them to take. If you make yourself constantly available, they will expect it. If you never say no, they will assume you never have limits. If you tolerate disrespect, they will continue to push those boundaries further and further, testing how much they can get away with. This is not because people are inherently malicious, but because human nature operates on reinforcement. If someone learns that they can take advantage of you without consequences, they will. If someone learns that you prioritize their needs over your own, they will continue to place themselves first, expecting you to accommodate them Every time. The challenge is that many people are afraid to set boundaries because they fear the reaction. They worry that saying no will make them seem rude, selfish, or uncaring. They believe that they must explain, justify, or soften their stance in order to make others feel comfortable. But the reality is, if setting a boundary upsets someone, it is because they benefited from you not having one. People who genuinely respect and value you will not be offended by your boundaries. They will understand and appreciate them. It is only those who wish to take advantage of you that will push back, manipulate, or guilt trip you for prioritizing yourself. Boundaries are not just about saying no. They are about self-respect. They send a message to the world that your time, your energy, and your emotions are valuable. They create a standard for how you expect to be treated, and when you enforce them, you naturally filter out people who do not belong in your life. Those who refuse to respect your boundaries reveal themselves quickly. They test them, ignore them, or try to convince you that you are being unreasonable, but that is not your problem to fix. The most difficult part of setting boundaries is overcoming the guilt. Society often teaches people, especially those who are naturally empathetic or giving, that they must always be available, always be accommodating, always put others first. But constantly giving at the expense of yourself does not make you kind. It makes you exhausted. It makes you resentful. It makes you feel like your own needs are secondary, which over time erodes your self-worth. A major misconception about boundaries is that they push people away. In reality, they do the opposite. They allow you to form healthier, more balanced relationships where mutual respect exists. When you set clear boundaries, you attract people who respect them. You teach others that you will not tolerate being used, manipulated, or taken for granted. And in doing so, you create space for genuine connections built on mutual understanding rather than obligation. The fear of setting boundaries often stems from a fear of losing people. But the question you must ask yourself is this: if someone only stays in your life because they can take advantage of your lack of boundaries, is that really someone you want around? If the only way to keep certain people happy is to sacrifice your own well-being, is that truly a relationship worth maintaining? The people who are meant to be in your life will respect your boundaries. They will not take offense when you enforce. They will understand that your needs are just as important as theirs. Enforcing boundaries is not about being aggressive or harsh. It is about being firm and consistent. It means recognizing when someone is overstepping, addressing it without guilt, and maintaining that line even when they push back on. It means not over-explaining or apologizing for prioritizing yourself. It means understanding that self-respect is not selfish. It is necessary. Once you establish boundaries, you begin to see a shift in how people interact with you. The ones who respected you all along will continue to do so, while those who only valued you for what they could take will either resist or fade away. And that is exactly how it should be, because the relationships that remain, the ones built on mutual respect and understanding, are the ones truly worth keeping. Discomfort is an unavoidable part of growth. People often avoid making difficult decisions because they fear the short-term discomfort that comes with them. They stay in toxic relationships, maintain one-sided friendships, and keep engaging with people who drain them because cutting ties feels uncomfortable. The guilt, the awkwardness, the uncertainty, it all makes them hesitate. But what they fail to realize is that avoiding discomfort only leads to long-term suffering. The temporary unease of ghosting someone, of walking away, of setting a firm boundary is far less painful than the slow erosion of self-respect that comes from allowing the wrong people to remain in your life. There is a deeply ingrained belief that doing what is right should feel easy, that if a decision is truly good for you, it should come with relief, with clarity, with no second guessing. But that is not how life works. The right decisions are often the hardest ones to make. Leaving behind someone who has been in your life for years, even if they bring you nothing but stress, is difficult. Saying no to someone you once cared about, even when they no longer treat you with respect, is uncomfortable. But discomfort is not an indication that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are breaking free from patterns that no longer serve you. People often mistake comfort for happiness. They assume that just because something feels familiar, it must be worth holding on to. But familiarity is not the same as fulfillment. Just because you have tolerated certain behaviors for a long time does not mean you should continue to do so. Comfort can be deceptive. It can keep you trapped in situations that are slowly draining you simply because the alternative, stepping away, cutting ties, ghosting, feels unfamiliar and therefore scary. Ghosting is often seen as an act of avoidance, but in many cases, it is an act of self-preservation. There are people who will never accept your boundaries, no matter how many times you try to explain them. They will argue, manipulate, guilt trip, and do everything in their power to keep you engaged. With these people, silence is the only real option. There is no benefit to repeatedly explaining yourself to someone who refuses to listen. There is no point in giving closure to someone who only wants to keep the door open for their own benefit. Walking away without a word is not cruel when the alternative is allowing yourself to be disrespected over and over again. People struggle with ghosting because they have been conditioned to believe that they owe everyone an explanation. That closure is something they must provide, even if the other person never respected them in the first place. But closure is often a lie. It is an excuse to stay connected, to leave room for future manipulation, to give someone an opportunity to justify their behavior. True closure does not come from long, drawn-out conversations. It comes from deciding that you are done and acting accordingly. The reality is that self-respect requires making difficult choices. It requires doing what is right for you, even when it feels uncomfortable. It requires recognizing that short-term guilt is a small price to pay for long-term peace. People who rely on guilt to keep you around do not actually care about your well-being. They care about maintaining their access to you. They want to keep benefiting from your presence, your energy, your emotional labor. When you ghost them, you are taking that power away. You are choosing yourself over their expectations. It is important to understand that discomfort is temporary, but self-respect is permanent. The uneasy feeling that comes with removing yourself from a toxic situation will pass. The guilt of not responding, not explaining, not engaging will fade. But if you continue to tolerate people who drain you, the resentment, exhaustion, and frustration will only grow. The more you allow people to cross your boundaries, the harder it becomes to enforce them. And eventually you will reach a point where you no longer recognize yourself because you have spent so much time prioritizing everyone else. Every time you make a choice that values your well-being over someone else's expectations, you reinforce your self-respect. It does not matter if others understand. It does not matter if they call you selfish, cold, or unkind. What matters is that you are no longer sacrificing yourself for people who do not appreciate you. The discomfort of ghosting someone, of walking away, of setting boundaries without explanation is nothing compared to the lifelong exhaustion of allowing the wrong people to remain in your life. Healing is not something that happens overnight. It is a process, often a long and painful one, that requires you to step away from people who have hurt you, drained you, or disrespected you. And yet, many people struggle with healing because they refuse to let go completely. They leave the door slightly open. They keep checking in. They wonder if things could have been different. But real healing only happens when you cut ties fully, when you ghost the people who have proven time and time again that they are not meant to be in your life. People believe that healing means making peace with everything, that it requires a final conversation, an explanation, a sense of closure. But closure is something you give yourself, not something you get from others. The mistake people make is thinking they need permission to move on, that they need the other person to acknowledge their pain. to understand their reasons for leaving. But waiting for someone else to validate your healing only keeps you stuck in the cycle of hurt. The truth is, you don't need them to understand. You don't need them to agree with your decision. You just need to walk away and let time do its work. One of the hardest parts of healing is resisting the urge to go back. The temptation to reach out, to check if they've changed, to see if they miss you, can be overwhelming. But every time you look back, you delay your own progress. Every time you reopen a door that should have stayed closed, you invite the same pain, the same patterns, the same disappointment back into your life. Healing requires discipline. It requires choosing yourself. Even when it feels difficult, even when your emotions tell you otherwise, otherwise. There is a misconception that healing is supposed to feel good, that once you make the right decision, you will immediately feel lighter, happier, and at peace. But healing is messy. It is painful. It is full of moments where you question yourself, where you wonder if you did the right thing, where you feel the weight of loneliness pressing down on you. But just because something feels difficult does not mean it is wrong. Growth is uncomfortable. Letting go hurts. But staying in the same place, repeating the same cycles, letting the same people hurt you over and over again, that is far more painful in the long run. Healing also means accepting that not everyone will get what they deserve. Sometimes the people who hurt you will never apologize. They will never acknowledge the damage they caused. They will move on without a second thought while you are left picking up the pieces. But waiting for someone else's regret, hoping that they will come back and admit they were wrong, is a waste of your time. But their recognition does nothing for your healing. Their apology will not erase what happened. The only thing that will truly set you free is deciding that you do not need their remorse in order to move forward. Ghosting someone for the sake of your own healing is not cruel. It is necessary. Some people will never allow you to move on if you keep them in your life. They will guilt trip you, manipulate you, drag you back into conversations that serve no purpose other than to keep you emotionally attached. They will try to convince you that you owe them closure, that you should at least say something before you walk away. But the moment you engage, the moment you explain yourself, you give them the opportunity to pull you back in. Healing means learning to be okay with silence. It means resisting the urge to seek validation. It means understanding that not every wound will be acknowledged. Not every betrayal will be avenged. Not every ending will come with a satisfying resolution. It is learning to sit with your own emotions, to process your own pain without needing someone else to make it right. And when you reach that point, when you truly detach, you will realize that the people you ghosted were never meant to be part of your future in the first place.